Hi there, I'm your host, Mr. Doyle, and this is a great undertaking. First and foremost, I want to thank those of you who recently subscribed to the channel, and especially those who have been interacting with me in the comments. I appreciate your thoughts and your time. And hey, if you're not subbed, like maybe you could do me a solid and click the bell. You see the bell. Please click the bell. Please, I need views to survive. Your subs are my nourishment. I'm begging you, just click the bell. Please just give me validation. Anyway, this is my Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill costume. It's one of the stories that King wrote that was featured in Creepshow, and I talk about it a little bit more in my Uncollected King video, but like, for real though, these overalls are insulated, and between the flannel shirt and the insulated overalls, I am dying. So I'm just gonna take these off real quick, and I'll just keep recording. In this series, I will be taking a look at the Creepshow franchise. Today we're going to be discussing the original 1982 Creepshow film, as well as the graphic novella, which was based on that movie. And in upcoming videos, we will take a closer look at 1987's Creepshow 2, followed by Creepshow 3, which was released in 2006. And then, of course, there's the ongoing Creepshow TV series. The original 1982 Creepshow movie was written by Stephen King, directed by George Romero, with special effects by Tom Savini and a graphic novella with artwork by Bernie Wrightson. Four of the most influential horror icons of all time, all legends in their respective fields, working together for the first time in a momentous, once-in-a-lifetime occasion. So the results, Creepshow, must have been groundbreaking, right? Like, it must have been a masterclass in filmmaking within the horror genre, right? Well, let's not get too carried away. Worship and tribute. Creepshow is an homage to the damn it, I never get this one right. Creepshow is an homage to the classic horror comics of the 1950s. This was the era and gory glory days of EC Comics, and two of their most notable series, Tales from the Crypt and The Vault of Horror, were especially influential and inspirational in regards to the style and storytelling featured within Creepshow. Both King and Romero have reminisced about the impact these comics had on their work in numerous publications and interviews. One can't help but wonder what King and Romero's trajectories and careers would have looked like absent the influence and impact of their exposure to these graphic stories at a young age. Take it a step further, though, and imagine where the horror genre would be today without the influence and impact of King and Romero. Would we have had landmark horror moments like Night of the Living Dead or Salem's Lot without Tales from the Crypt? And subsequently, would we have the same arguably oversaturated horror media landscape we have now without King and Romero? It's safe to say that were EC Comics removed from the equation, things likely would have gone very differently for King, Romero, and the horror genre in general. For a deep dive into the history of EC Comics, check out the two-part video series entitled The Golden Age of Horror Comics by In Praise of Shadows, to which links can be found in the description below. I'm a big fan of what that channel has been doing, and I think most of my viewers would be into it as well. Creepshow, the graphic novella. This companion piece to the original Creepshow film was essentially an illustrated scene-by-scene depiction of the film. Bernie Wrightson, best known for his work on and creation of Swamp Thing, as well as his graphic interpretation of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, did the majority of the art for the graphic novella, and like King and Romero, Wrightson's work was directly influenced by the early EC Comics he pored over as a kid. However, their influence is even more prominent in Wrightson's artistic style than in that of King or Romero. Wrightson's career would see him working with and for comic book publishers both large and small, doing concept art for films including Ghostbusters and Spider-Man, illustrating with popular novelists including Stephen King's Cycle of the Werewolf, and while his work and influence would reach a remarkably wide audience, he would never attain the same household name status that many of his contemporaries and peers would. That's not to say his influence wasn't equally impactful to the likes of his contemporaries, however. Wrightson passed away in March of 2017, just a few months before Romero, and the likes of Guillermo del Toro, Neil Gaiman, and Joss Whedon, who were among many who, upon Wrightson's passing, wrote testimonies and tributes in memoriam. Again, the influence EC Comics had on Wrightson, and by way of Wrightson, on his professional admirers and fans of his work, further begs the question, what would the horror landscape look like today were it not for this fondness and influence? Where would we be without nostalgia, and how has it moved the horror genre forward? And how has it perhaps hindered the genre? Nostalgia. Creepshow, if nothing else, is a product of nostalgia. It is a shameless, heart-on-their-sleeves acknowledgement from the film's creators that this is where it all began for them. It's their way of paying their respects, of recognizing their roots, and of bringing the experience to a new audience, so perhaps they might find the same enjoyment and experience that they felt themselves. Creepshow, despite its flaws, was a passion project for all involved, a love letter of sorts to an important piece of the history and the heart of a genre so much of pop culture has built itself around and enveloped itself within. Creepshow is a time capsule that allows those of us who weren't there to understand just what was so endearing and entrancing about the medium to the likes of Stephen King, George Romero, and Bernie Wrightson. Sure, it's corny, pulpy, and campy, and perhaps it's hard for someone who grew up in the modern age of blockbuster CGI eye-candy superhero films to fully appreciate or understand the appeal. But what EC Comics was doing was nothing short of groundbreaking and wildly controversial back in the 1950s. Were it not for these torchbearers and pioneers of the genre, their effects on the next generation, and the ongoing cycle of nostalgic imitation and tribute from the generations that followed, the horror landscape would likely be a barren one indeed. Nostalgic exploitation. But what does the current horror landscape look like? How many reinterpretations, reboots, remakes, retreads, and retellings of classic horror stories are there? Hundreds. How many zombie movies are there at this point? Literal thousands, at least 7,900 to be exact. You want vampires? Yeah, we've got that covered. Monster movies? Oh yeah, we're remaking all of those. Haunted houses? Oh sweet Jesus, yes. So many. Possessions? Have we got a few? Do we f***ing ever? We've got every popular horror trope viewed and approached from every possible angle. It sure seems like the majority of horror films in particular are caught in this current of nostalgic fondness, and while this trend is certainly not relevant strictly within the horror genre, it is certainly prevalent in the horror genre. At times it can feel as if horror films specifically have hit a creative wall where anything original that can be considered noteworthy or praiseworthy is in short supply. There is an ongoing recycling of intellectual property across so much of popular culture, which has been going on since time out of mind, and has become an unending trend in which humanity is seemingly forever bound to attempt to recreate our successes, stuck within the confines of those who came before, and in many cases it sure feels like the wellspring of originality has nearly run dry. Like we are continually subjected to the byproducts of the nostalgia from previous generations and from our own generation. Recent examples include Ghostbusters being rebooted again, and yes, I'm counting Ghostbusters as horror. That shit was terrifying as a child. The basement of the public library that I grew up with was never the same after that movie. Also, they recently announced a remake of The Lost Boys. Hell, just the number of King remakes alone is astounding. The Stand TV series, It, and Pet Sematary are all recent examples of King remakes. The Carrie movie was remade twice and interpreted throughout numerous mediums. Salem's Lot is currently being remade for the second time. There are something like 20,000 Children of the Corn movies, the latest of which was made as recently as 2020. And why is that? For what purpose? I mean, aside from money. The film industry sure loves to prey on our collective nostalgia. They will continue to make and remake and reboot successful or fondly remembered properties and genre staples in order to exploit our collective enjoyment of the classics, so long as there is a reasonable, calculable profit margin. They rely on the same titles, stories, themes, and tropes so often that it feels as if nothing is sacred. There is no property they won't commandeer so long as there is a buck to be made. But to say there are no new ideas or original artists out there in the horror scape would be disingenuous. Just look at Jordan Peele's first two films, Get Out and Us. Those were wildly original and unconventional films. Or a huge number of films from the A24 catalog. The Lighthouse, Midsommar, Somar, I don't know, Hereditary, and The Witch, just to name a few. All unique, compelling, and terrifying films in their own right. Thankfully, not everything in the horror genre is a product of nostalgia or some regurgitated set of themes and ideas, but goddamn if the world of scary movies isn't oversaturated with so much derivative, imitative, conventional bullshit that the aforementioned standout films stand out predominantly due to the fact that they aren't reliant on standing on the shoulders of those stories, films, and writers that popularized the medium. Final thoughts. Look, all I'm saying is that what King, Romero, Wrightson, and Savini did with Creepshow was a tribute to their early influences and predecessors. And that's fine, because after that movie, and hell, well before that, they went their own ways, developed their own brands, and crafted their own legacies. And since that time, they and their contemporaries have provided a foundation for an untold number of uninspired copycats and coattail riders to build ramshackle houses upon that bear a striking yet superficial resemblance to the manners of which these lords of horror aspired. But we can all take solace in the fact that true artistic achievement in the world of horror is still being sought after and achieved with regularity without relying on nostalgic manipulation, even if they're far rarer than the derivative works of their far less ambitious peers. To anyone that is new to the channel, I hope you will take a moment to subscribe and check out some of my other videos. I've been getting away from doing straight-up reviews lately since there are a plethora of content creators out here already doing that sort of thing. No one needs yet another scene-by-scene or chapter-by-chapter breakdown of any King material, as there are so many of them already, and I hope this less conventional approach is a little more of a unique way of doing things. Gotta practice what I preach after all, right? Next week I'll be looking at Creepshow 2, and well, we'll see what that's all about. As of now, I haven't seen it, and I have no idea what the video will be about. So, yeah. New videos drop on this channel every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so use the tip of your nose to click the subscriber bell just to see how difficult it is, and if you're successful in doing so, you'll get notifications. Okay, goodbye. Be sure to click like and subscribe to the channel for my continued analysis of all things Stephen King, pretty pleased with blood and guts on top. My name is Mr. Doyle, and this has been a great undertaking.